Hi everyone. So today we basically have the incumbent president Donald Trump running against the most second most likely person to run in 2020s, and that is Joe Biden. So looking at the map, it's obviously Biden favored, if I want to say that, but there are ways that Trump can win. So I'm just going to change it to safe and toss up so we can get that rolling. So obvious states that Biden would win: uncompetitive Western Coast territory, mostly for Biden, except for Alaska, which would most likely go to Trump. But then going over, actually Utah, if Evan McMullin runs again, that could become competitive, especially with Joe Biden. Nebraska, most of their electoral votes, except for that one electoral vote, would be considered safe for Donald Trump. West Virginia, actually, yeah, West Virginia would be safe for Trump. Indiana could become, would have been mildly competitive, much more likely Trump, but because of the Mike Pence factor, I'm giving that to Donald Trump, sorry. In New York, that's the Northeast is definitely going to go to Joe Biden, especially because he's from he's from Delaware, and then going over to Minnesota. Minnesota and New Mexico are tricky. We're actually going to go into safe, likely, leaning, and toss up, because I'm going to put Minnesota and New Mexico as likely for Joe Biden. Arizona and Georgia I would put likely for Trump. Actually, Georgia would actually only be leaning Trump. Yeah, will be likely Trump, actually. Sorry for keep changing. Nebraska, if Bernie Sanders was the candidate, I could see Nebraska's second congressional district become competitive, but because Joe Biden is the candidate, I don't really see much of a path for a Biden victory in the second congressional district. Then going over to a state like Colorado, I would classify that, like New Mexico, as likely for Joe Biden. I do think that he could pull off a victory in Colorado. Like, the demographics are changing there. Colorado is becoming much more, there's much more young people, there's much more Hispanic people, and those two groups are more likely to vote Democratic. Vermont would be safe for Joe Biden. I can't see some kind of Bernie Sanders write-in campaign affect the results of Vermont. Actually, I'm actually going to put that as only likely Biden, because if there was the primary contest between Biden and Sanders, and Biden won, I could see Bernie Sanders, probably not, but if he did run an independent write-in campaign, I could possibly see him taking that. I think if Bernie Sanders runs a write-in campaign, Vermont would become very competitive. But then going over to the Western Coast, Nevada, I think this would be a bit closer than in 2016, but I still think that it would be a leaning state for Joe Biden. I mean, I do think that the white working class Biden will cut in on the vote of the white working class, and that will affect Trump's chances in every single one of these swing states. Then now all the states we have are over on the eastern side of the US. So up in Maine, I think that Maine at large would be considered likely Biden. Maine's first congressional district would be considered certain Biden, and the second congressional district would be likely Biden, leaning Biden. In New Hampshire, this is tricky. I would say for the stuff that Trump said about New Hampshire, I would give that to Joe Biden, especially like he's from Delaware, so you know that would make a difference. Um, in Pennsylvania, I think with Bernie Sanders it would be quite competitive, but um, Joe Biden was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was born in Pennsylvania, so I would give that as likely for Joe Biden. Uh, and up in Michigan, Trump's approval rating is like 30% there. I'm not seeing much chances of a Trump victory in Michigan. Um, but he could always pull it off. But I think Wisconsin, Wisconsin and Florida would probably be the most competitive races. Um, Wisconsin, I don't want to touch just yet. Iowa, I think that Iowa would be leaning for Trump. I think that, if in the primary contest it was a Sanders Biden, I think that Sanders would pull off a victory in Iowa, just because he's better at Midwestern states and northern states, but then Biden's better at the southern states. Um, but yeah, then going over to a state like Virginia, I think being in the Northeast, that would be leaning for Biden. I think that Virginia is becoming much more progressive. In 1996, in 2000, it wasn't even 2000 that was a likely Republican state. In 2004, it was only leaning Republican. In 2008, it was a pure toss-up. Obama was the first person since who knows when to flip Virginia. And in 2012, it was leaning Obama. In 2016, it's likely for Clinton. And Virginia will continue on that trend. Then going down to a state like North Carolina. North Carolina is a state where I do think that Donald Trump could win. I think if Trump really, if he campaigns in North Carolina, he suppresses the African American vote. He gets out his white voters to come out and vote for him in these rural part of the state. I think that he could pull off a victory in North Carolina. Then going down to a state like Florida. Florida is a really, really difficult one to call. But I'm going to lean at Biden. Now, I think that it would be extremely close. I think that it is possible for Donald Trump to win. However, right now, I do think that Joe Biden has a shot. I think he will do better than Clinton. Sorry, he will do better than Obama did in the Bible Belt, Black Belt, whatever you want to call it. But then going over to a state like Wisconsin, that's really hard to call. I'm going to have it as likely Biden. I think that Trump's approval rating is not so high. He can't keep up on his promises. Then going down to Ohio, that is really tough. But I'm going to call it for Trump. I think that he could pull off a victory in Ohio. Now, for the two remaining states, Utah and Vermont, I think if Bernie Sanders was to run a really strong writing campaign, then it would go to him. In Utah, I'm not seeing much of a chance for Evan McMullin. I'm going to say it's likely for Trump. The only reason Evan McMullin was able to get a lot of the vote in Utah was because the Utah people, they didn't like Clinton. They didn't like Trump. But I think the people who didn't like Clinton, those Democratic voters in Utah, will come out and vote for Biden like they didn't do for Clinton. So final electoral map. I'm just going to put this in Biden's column for the sake of explanation. 308 for Joe Biden, 230 for Trump. Thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.